We have an exciting night in front of us. We have some amazing speakers. Just to give you a little bit of a background on the schedule, I would give a brief introduction of myself, would then tell you a little bit about our lovely speakers, and in the end we would have a little bit of social time for everyone to chat, to ask for help on the job search, on any design related topics or whatever is currently coming up in their mind. Let me start to introduce myself. So I will be your host tonight. My name is Philipp. I'm one of the co-founders of MVST. We are a digital product agency based here in beautiful Munich. We develop, design beautiful digital products. So no matter if they're web products or mobile products, we deliver them for our customers. I actually started the Munich FIGMA Meetup. It's our first meetup, and I wanted to get a community going here, especially here in Munich, because we have a very, very, very big sketch meetup group. The one or the other might know that one. So this group has way over 5,000 people and like hundreds and hundreds of people attending in each of the meetups. But no one was talking about Figma here in Munich, and there was no real community to talk to here in Munich. So I jumped ahead and took the opportunity to start up a meetup group just evolving around Figma. It's always a bit hard to find speakers, especially if you have a small crowd and your meetup is not established, but I was lucky to find two beautiful co-hosts for tonight's event. One is Haerin Song from Klarna, who's going to talk about progress over perfection and remote workshops using Figma. So thanks a lot for joining us in the talk. And then I'm, very, very proud that someone of Figma is actually joining us. So Nikolas Klein is a product designer at Figma and is working at Figma. And he is going to talk about collaborative creativity and going from my to our ideas. So very, very happy to have you on board as well, Nikolas. Thanks for joining us tonight. And last but not least, I would like to give a little talk myself about Figma, as Figma has changed the way we collaborate drastically as an agency. So I'm going to talk about how we transitioned, from which tools we actually transitioned, and we'll also give a little bit of insights about how we actually work and how we work using Figma. I think you guys can't unmute yourself currently, so that was an unintention. But after each talk, I would quickly allow everyone to be able to ask questions and to shoot some ideas and thoughts and change and exchange some thoughts on every topic. I hope you can hear me well. I hope that all worked out great, and I hope you enjoyed the music. As I don't want to hold you guys this evening on too long, and I want to give you a heads up into the exciting talks, I would actually like to hand over to Haerin for her first talk and give her the stage.
Thanks, Philip. Can you actually hear me clearly?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Great. Please let me know if the internet connection break on the way. I might just talk without the sound. Right, so I'm gonna try to share my screen now then. Okay, so is the screen is showing? Yes? Great. Perfect. So thanks, Philip. And hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I hope you're all well and healthy. Today, I will talk about my journey, how I transitioned my design process, and organize a remote workshop using Figma. I will start with some introduction and share some real-life examples. And in the end, I will share a few key takeaways and Figma template link. So, to introduce a little bit about myself, I'm Haerin. I'm currently a product designer at Klarna. And before I worked at Klarna, I was working for Vodafone and its innovation lab called Crash. I've been using either Figma or Sketch or both to design, depends on the company setup. And as a person, I like to have lots of plans around me, as you can see. And lately, I'm spending my after work time making YouTube videos for design tutorials. And during the weekends, I usually get out from the city and have a walk in the forest. So that's a little bit about me. And now I would like to start with a question. How often do we ask ourselves, what do I need to learn today? This is a diagram of a skill set that is required for a UX designer. Every other day, new tools are coming and new methods are writing. We need to code, we need to research, and so on and so forth. The expectation for designers is exponentially growing. But while those requirements are expanding, our design timeframe is radically reducing with agile development. We learn various methods and skills, but in reality, we don't even have time to apply what we've learned. When we are in the sprint cycle, we need to deliver design within 2 weeks or longer if we're lucky. And one day, I found this interesting graph from the book called Thank You for Being Late. This is a chart illustrating the fact that now the rate of technological change is accelerating so fast that many of us cannot keep pace anymore. I mean, no wonder why everything feels like we're in a constant catch-up mode. But we can't slow down this technological progress. But instead, we can increase our ability to adapt by optimizing ourselves for learning. But are we in the right environment? When our companies and teams are optimized for speed than learning, our tool must support us to efficient with time. Before I used Figma, I used to spend a lot of time searching for the right tool for different purposes. And once in a while, I had to update the outdated JPEG images like spread all over in Jira tickets or any other documentation. But since I started to use Figma, now I finally stopped searching for new tools all the time. Also, I don't need extra work for updating files thanks to real-time Figma plugin for Jira and Notion. But what does it mean to our product teams? I once had a situation that people position themselves on top of others by creating information silos. It was not a pleasant feeling. I felt like the door was shut right in front of me. And I heard people around me felt in the same ways and started to care less about their products. But when we share what we know, people start to share and trust us, and we also trust them. And I believe this trust is a basic step to build a relationship, to collaborate and build a great product. And so far, Figma enabled us to share so easily at any time, anywhere, and to anyone. So I've replaced some sensitive information, but this is a snapshot of the workshop that we did. So usually I would have imagined myself to organize a workshop on a whiteboard and a sticky notes with lots of snacks, but due to Corona outbreak, our team had to make a remote workshop. My product manager was already used to Figma, and we didn't want to pay extra for other collaboration tools just for one day. And since you can just change between editor and viewer mode without extra payments, we just decided to use Figma to organize a remote workshop. And these are a few key points that helped our workshop work. So first point was help your team familiarize themselves with Figma before entering the workshop. And second point, focus on inspiration and excitement rather than the number of tasks. And third, collaborate with your product manager to move forward the learnings to delivery. Throughout this workshop, we wanted to reveal the design that was work in progress and invite engineers to build our product together. So on top of the existing design concept, we asked engineers to submit their ideas in Figma around like 1 week before the workshop. Since the workshop was short and remote, it was important that the team familiarize with the framework and Figma. So I shared a couple of YouTube tutorials and include instruction on how to use the items within Figma. And as you know, a remote workshop is less personal than the on-site workshop. But if your team already has the offline workshop experience, you can also bring that to an online platform. So while we were voting ideas with free discussion, I was amazed at how creative people can be. For example, our team members were given 10 dots, and when they used all the dots, they just made dots super huge to show that they like the ideas. I mean, this is pretty cute. But also one of the benefits of the remote workshop with Figma is that you can back up each stage by duplicating layers. For example, you can save the dot voted step before moving the cars to the metrics and going to another level. And if you're lucky, your teammates may have lots of ideas. But instead of trying to cover all those ideas, just pick only top voted ones and focus more on the discussion. Because the goal here is to get the feeling of what excites the team and get inspired. And we don't want this exercise to become one of the technical grooming sessions. Also, I was working closely with my product manager to prepare this workshop. Because I was already using Figma with my product manager every day to exchange ideas. And eventually we want to bring these ideas into life. And the product managers are obviously the magician to convert those ideas to the Jira tickets. And after the workshop, I've created separate Figma files to sort out ideas from the workshop in different lanes. For each lanes, I've divided cards for development, new ideas, and future ideas. Especially the cards for development, I used the Figma feature to create the link to connect cards with Jira ticket. It was pretty helpful. And it was so amazing that after the workshop, lots of ideas were flowing in the Slack channel from engineers. I used that green area to capture ideas after the workshop for continuous inspiration. So these are a few takeaways that I've learned from my journey exploring Figma with my team. First, start small. Try to make short and often rather than a big and lengthy remote workshop. And second, to use time efficiently in the remote workshop, collaborate both offline and online. And lastly, let your work accessible for your team and embrace the vulnerability in exchange for trust. And my favorite part was the third point. As you know, in the age of acceleration, we have to constantly learn to perform with less and less time. And collaboration is not easy. But once we start to collaborate beyond our design community, we can learn faster and build so much better product together. I mean, powered by the shining ideas from cross disciplines. And Figma can be your good friend to start building that trustful relationship. So I've made my Figma workshop template available in this link so that you can play around. And I will share again in the chat later because probably it's too long to copy and write it down. And lastly, if anyone is interested, please check out my YouTube channel called Soda Design, where I'm sharing prototype tutorials that I designed with Figma. I'll be also sharing some Figma tips in upcoming videos. So thanks for listening today. I hope you all stay safe and healthy. I'll give it back to Philipp.
Thanks a lot, Haerin. Thanks a lot. So does anyone have questions for Haerin? I think you are all able to unmute yourself, so feel free to shoot any questions that you currently have before we continue.
Yeah, hey, hello everyone. I'm Lydia. I have a question. First of all, thank you so much for the talk. It was very insightful. I was just wondering if you observed a switch within your team after this initiative, and if you can tell us a bit more about this.
If you specifically ask me for a group of engineers, already yes, because our main audience was engineers, because as you know, we mostly are familiar like to collaborate with designers and product managers, researchers, but sometimes engineers a little bit having some distance. And the reason why I mainly focus on engineers was I always try to ask personally or in the chat or in the meeting, hey, if you have cool ideas, can you just let me know? I'm totally open for it. But no one actually did. And I don't think they just don't have a bad intention, but they just don't have the ritual with you, or just maybe don't know when to access you, probably because designer looks very busy, right? But actually throughout this workshop, I was so happy that like engineers just started to talk to me. Like they just come to me in the Slack channel, like obviously like here and there. Hey, Haerin, I found this cool screenshot. Like, and then just like, yes, Chris, yes, blah, blah, blah. I totally hear you and I've totally captured your ideas. And I showed that Figma board that it's real. I'm not just saying it to make you feel good, but I'm actually really listening to you. I'm totally putting on the board and I will remember it. And I actually did. And that was the first or biggest change that I felt successful from doing this workshop, that opening up the discussion with the developers, which was amazing. And also one of the quotes that I cannot forget was, I just shared some screenshot and I asked in the channel, hey, Mr. Developer, can you, do you think we can have this on our scope? And then one of our the developers just saying, yes, Haerin, like, it's just cool. I want to make it happen. I mean, that was not the often things that you hear when you design and develop. You usually have a pushback and like you have to persuade them. But since we're like participating those workshops all together and you really take their opinion into account within the workshop, and we actually did, putting in so much ideas into our actual development, I think they also feel that ownership. And that's what I really actually wanted to share with you, that build, I mean, it's just a one time, but it can be like multiple times, like in short. And I think that's how I do like small trust, like building like incrementally. So, I mean, I hope I can have bigger changes, but that was a very nice first step after this workshop. So, and developers were asking, when are we going to do it again? So positive. So I hope anyone can try it out and also have a good experience by doing it. Thanks, Lydia.
Thank you. That's great insight.
Any other questions? Feel free to just step forward. Nope, so far. So we will have, in the end, another round of Q&A for everyone. So thanks, Haerin. Thanks a lot for the great talk. Yeah, the clapping is missing, right, in the virtual meeting. Normally, like people would clap and you would go off the stage. So.
You can do the emoji here.
Yeah, that's true. That's right. Sweet. Thanks a lot, Haerin. Very, very nice. Very insightful. Cool. Without, I guess, yeah, any further ado, I would actually hand over to Nikolas, who is very used to talking at these late times as he's working with Figma across the sea, basically. So I think it's his prime hour. I'm happy to hear his talk. And I guess the stage is yours.
Hey everyone, let me share my screen. Cool. Everyone see? Can people see my screen? Yes. Yes. Perfect. Thank you. Yeah. My name name is Nico. And yes, as you were saying, it's true. I'm working normally at these hours because that's the time when it's like, I don't know, 10 a.m. in San Francisco or something. So I work with Figma as a product designer here from Germany. I don't have a visa. The current situation doesn't make it necessarily easier to get a visa, but that's an entirely different story. And first, a little bit about me. I studied in Schwäbisch Gmünd, actually not that far from Munich. I think it's like 1.5 or 2 hours or something. And I studied interaction design. So it's kind of like, okay, how do people interact with technology? How do people interact with computers? And at that time, you also learn Flash. You learn how, I don't know, Photoshop works, or you know how Illustrator works. Like you learn that. And all of those tools are kind of like these behemoths of software. They're just like super, super complicated. And you never really like get a sense of like why they are like that. But then I started developing sketch plugins and working with sketch plugins. So I was working on Sketch Runner. And then when I was at Shopify in Canada for a bit, I was working on Polaris Telescope. So the most interesting thing that happened while I was working on these sketch plugins is that I suddenly realized that the tools we're using are also just software that can be designed. And I was studying how software can be designed and how it works. So it's kind of like got me hooked into design tools and stuff like this, which kind of like fast forward a bit. I joined Figma then in March 2018. I think it was just, 35, 40 people or something. We're now at 250. So the last years have just been like, I don't know, incredibly wild. And I want to talk a little bit about what happened when I joined at that point. So when I joined, I hadn't really, I joined because Figma was kind of like, had a nice component override system. Like could click into the layers, I could directly write in there. I hadn't really thought about the collaboration aspect of it. So what happened was that I was tasked with changing the comment pins. So I was tasked with changing the comment pins, and I had like prepared design crit. Here's a couple of states of how comment pins should work. And after I did that, I went into design grid, and like everyone just like started coming into this file, and people just like took the things that I built and took them into their own corner and tried some own ideas, and other people kind of like took those ideas and changed them. And at some point, it wasn't really clear of who owns what, and ultimately it wasn't necessary anymore, because what happened was that what throughout this process, what happened was that we went from my ideas, hey, those are my comment pins, to I left the design crit session with like, I don't know, 100 ideas from like a random set of people, because you don't know who inspired whom in those moments. And so that's kind of like what we call a collaborative creativity. And it's interesting to dive a little bit deeper into this and talk a little about the value of collaboration, also a little bit more kind of like collaborative creativity, and this idea of open design, which is ultimately kind of like this context in which collaborative creativity can thrive. But first, like stepping back, it's kind of like, of course, you have to like, what is design? And I think it's interesting that people design or define design by the value that it brings to the product or to the business. It helps to solve user problems, but you can also define it by what it's not. It's not just making things look good. But most interesting for us is kind of like people building tools is looking at the process of what people do while they are saying they're designing. And it's ultimately, there's some truth to it being figuring out what not to do. Like probably a lot of you can relate that someone asks, oh, have you tried something else? Have you tried this and this? You can like show them this entire page of other explorations, 100 different directions of how this could work as well, that you tried out and it failed and you like didn't like them and stuff. And so it's interesting that iterating is at the core of designing. And that makes total sense. Here's a model that we're gonna like extend a little further down in the talk, and it's based on the mind and sketch diagram that you might have seen in sketching user experiences from Bill Buxton. But it's ultimately, there's a super interesting truth to this. Like, we are the creator here on the left, and once we create an artifact, once we externalize our idea, then we can read and learn it. And read and learn, you could also define it as understanding. And ultimately, this is kind of like where the design tool comes in. The design tool allows you to externalize your ideas, and by externalizing your ideas, you can now look at those ideas and be like, oh, is this good? I don't know, it looked better in my head. It's kind of shitty. Let's try another idea. So you do that again and again and again. But that's kind of like the personal iteration process. Coming in like collaborative design tool. When Figma started, and FIGMA kind of like had the first 1.0 release. There was like comments on the internet. One of my favorite ones is kind of like, if this is the future of design, I'm switching careers. I would like to know if that person is still a designer, because like it's interesting. Like there's definitely, we'll come back to this point, but kind of like people were scared. But I think that the products we build today are super complex and highly intertwined with our day-to-day lives. Like we can't, there's so much like personal communication that's happening, there's so much personal expression that's happening, there's so much news, so much misinformation that's happening, that the effects of our digital products that we are building are real. They're not just like in the digital world, the effects are real. And so looking at this, and also you don't need to read this through, it's just like to show that there's incredible amount of aspects that we need to get right, and people can't, like a single designer can't be the person who gets all of these things right. It's just too much. So we need to be inclusive of the experts that we can get and to participate in that process. And it's interesting to think about, okay, now we need these experts to get these things right. Those are too complicated to just like build on your own. But it's too early when you're still scoping out what you want to build. And it's too late once you start to develop, because then it's kind of like concrete and it's a lot harder to change. And that's why it's, I think, ultimately clear that all of this collaboration has to happen in the design phase when building products. Because that's the time when the idea is like concrete enough that you can understand it, but not concrete so that you can still like change it and manipulate it and vary it around. So designing is the perfect time for everyone to join. But if we look back at this thing, what's happening, it's like this design tool at the moment just encapsulates this personal explorative iteration, this personal creativity. And what's happening and is that we've had for years and years, we've had separated tools. We've had separated tools that handled the collaboration. So once the designer in their own little bucket over here like felt nice, felt good about one idea, they duplicated that, they placed it somewhere else, they put it into a different software, put it in a different context. And in that context, the collaborator can now look at it, understand it, leave feedback. But once the collaborator leaves feedback here, the designer has to kind of like be in that context, go back into their own context and kind of like create again, and like, I don't know, it's just like slow. So people interested on like, I don't know, process design and stuff, there's this manual step, which makes this incredibly slow. But not only does it make it slow, it also enforces the designer to work on their own for a long time until they feel ready to share something into that other space. And that's ultimately what tools for collaborative creativity are doing. They merge this process together. They remove the need to duplicate this artifact, to be in a collaborative space, because the collaborative space is the creative space in which the people actually are designing, creating, and exploring different ideas. And super interesting is that it's not just that. It's ultimately, there's an entire idea around like that this needs to happen in an environment that is open for everyone. This is kind of like what open design is about. There's three key aspects of open design that I want to dive in. The first one is collaborators need to be able to become creators. Like looking at this diagram, the fascinating thing that's happening here is that if the collaborator has an idea and is like, oh, this could work like this, they could like explain this, but if they explain this and like leave feedback, yeah, then the other one has to kind of like create it on their own. And by them being able to just creating it and putting it side by side, this process can like go on and on and on in so much faster than if you kind of like have this verbal translation of this. And the second one is that in open design, we need to encourage immediate and asynchronous serendipity. And it's funny to show this picture because like, I don't know, it has been months that I collaborated with like directly with my colleagues, like sitting side by side. But it's ultimately like, we need the possibility to collaborate live and to kind of like immediately riff off each other's ideas, which is what I've explained before. But you also need the possibility to kind of like collaborate asynchronously, especially with this time difference that I have. What's happening often is that I jump into the design work in progress channel that we have in our Slack and see what people have been doing, maybe leave a comment here, like joining in there. Or what we've also did is asynchronous design critiques, is I've prepared a file and I'm like sending it out. And San Francisco afternoon time, I'm sleeping. They kind of like go through my file and leave feedback, leave ideas. And then when I wake up, I see all this kind of like new ideas in my file. And so this is kind of like in open design, you need to encourage asynchronous collaboration as well. But it's interesting, and that's kind of like the last point. It's like creativity is an intimate process. And this is also why this quote from the beginning, if this is the future of design, I'm switching curious, I can highly relate to this. Like it is scary if something like this happens. Like the boss comes in and be like, oh, can you make this button bigger? Can you make this pop more or something? And you're like, leave me the fuck alone. Like, and I think it's interesting that there's things that we as Figma, as kind of like the tool makers are trying to do, that if you create a new file, it defaults to be created in draft. So you can experiment and explore your ideas alone. And there's things that like the community came up with like status annotations, like this is in progress. Don't leave feedback here. Please don't leave feedback. So ultimately, we need kind of like a high trust environment in which this can work. So we need a high trust environment in which people can be open in sharing, and not kind of like other people like shitting on other people's ideas. Like that shouldn't, like flyby feedback, basically, as some people call it. So that can't happen. We need to find processes, and we as the people building the tool, we need to find ways to kind of like let people be creative even in private first. So wrapping it up, we need to unlock our collaborative creativity. That allows us to find solutions that are inclusive of the people out there. Because only when we work together, we can like solve these complicated problems. And we can do this through open design, in which collaborators can become creators, in which kind of like we encourage immediate asynchronous serendipity. And this entire thing is built on trust and privacy. There's a balance between those two. So yeah. Oh yeah, that's the last one I forgot. Only then we can get from kind of like this idea of my ideas to this idea of our ideas. And yeah, that's the wrap up. Thanks. I'm gonna open the chat.
Awesome. Nikolas, thanks a lot. That was quite insightful and some awesome design slides, I have to say. I mean, I wouldn't have expected anything else from someone coming from Figma, but they looked pretty crispy. Awesome stuff. Any question for Nico? Please feel free to just jump ahead. I'm sure you can also ask him some interesting Figma insights, not just about his talk.
Hi there. Thank you for that. That was really insightful, and I could really identify to this feeling of, oh no, people in my design file. It's so private. And I was wondering, because I completely agree that collaboration is so important, and letting people in and being able to riff off each other's ideas, absolutely no question about that. But I still see a bit the danger or the risk of too many people coming in and having very different ideas. And I'm wondering whether, of course, there's this area and atmosphere of trust, but besides that, did you have some processes in place or something like that to sort of set certain rules or guidelines of who can edit what, or who can come in at what point, or did you have anything like that in place?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, thanks for the question. When we started, we didn't. When we started, we were like 2 or 3 designers and kind of like a couple of engineers in these crits, and it was basically like we all fit together around the table when we had lunch. So this was like very open. But that's kind of like that was lucky for us, and I've heard it from a lot of different people that they struggle with this too. And one of the things that we've seen is that people created a Figma etiquette, or Figma etiquette in a way, when other people join the file. Like if you shake your cursor really quickly, it's like, that means a no, leave me alone, kind of like, let me work in this context. Mm-hmm. So that's an interesting way, but that only works, of course, if both parties agree to that behavior in a way. Mm. And it's super tricky if kind of like, if the boss comes in and like just ignores all of the signage, like, this is my scrap area, don't leave feedback here. So kind of like expectation management is hugely important, and that's one of the things when we do like a design crit, is that we try to kind of like set the expectations, which of the things you want to get feedback on, and put that very clearly at the beginning and the introduction of such a critique. And even in this design work in progress channel, the goal of that particular channel is not that other people jump in and kind of like critique your stuff. We have a separate channel for that, like it's called Design Crit then, and that's the place where we kind of like ask for specific feedback. I think it's like expectation management is key for this, of course, but that only works when the people actually kind of like respect those rules. And the kind of like the solution of is that we see people moving files back to drafts. They're in an environment, they kind of like kick people out again, they move this entire file to drafts to just continue to work in private. And that's like kind of like the hard solution. You can do this. It's not easy in the tool at the moment. And we've been discussing about an idea kind of like a do not disturb mode or something, in which the original creator of the file just gets more control over who can contribute. But at the same time, we've seen it being helpful in so many other cases that we don't want to make those cases harder. So it's like a super tricky balance for us of like, what can we do in the tool? And what can we kind of like not force, but kind of like make other people change their work environment so it's more friendly. But that's a super tricky balance, I guess. So I don't know. There's not a real answer. I kind of like it's the nature of the tool. It's upside, and at the same time it's the downside as well.
Yeah, but what I get from that is having a conversation and setting expectations.
Yeah,
yep.
that can help a lot.
It's very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks.
Actually, I have a question myself, Nikolas, because you just mentioned it, like the boss coming in and like looking at the file and like is able to see your cursor and follow you around. Is there are there any plans on FIGMA and like changing that up as well and like hiding my cursor or like hiding myself entirely from that I'm working on this file currently? Do you have any insights on that, or are you allowed to say anything on that?
Well, it's very specific. It's not, the goal is not to hide that you are in that file, because what would then happen is that the boss hides themselves and joins the file, and you don't even know who's in there. So I don't think that can be a solution. I think there's definitely something that we've played around with, like do not disturb stuff, of like I'm having my headphones on,
yeah.
like in that time when we were all still in the office, basically, and like you see someone having headphones on, and it's kind of like common courtesy to just not disturb them, right?
Yeah, that's
and
true.
So what are aspects like this that are very unintrusive, and people can still overrule them? Like if it's important, I can still tap them on the shoulder and be like, there's a fire, we need to get out of here. Like that should still be possible, basically, without like locking people out too much.
That makes sense. Cool. Any more questions from the people in the meeting to Nikolas? I don't think so. Thanks a lot, Nikolas.
Thanks so much for having me.
The virtual claps again. I need to get used to that. But actually, what is a good thing on these virtual meetups is you get right down to it, right? You can listen to the talks, you can jump in and out again, and like there's nothing that's like holding you off. You don't have to go somewhere, so it's actually quite a change. Cool. I guess then it's a time for myself to share my screen. Actually, Nikolas, what you said perfectly fits into my topic and my talk. So what I want to talk about is I want to be very, very pragmatic and very, very real life example on like how we actually work. So as I said from the start, we have a digital product development agency. So we do development and design here in Munich. And basically we also switched to FIGMA completely, roughly half a year ago. And it just changed the way that we collaborate with our clients and with our team. And I think a lot of the points that Nikolas just made, transfer perfectly into my talk as well. Just to set the frame correctly, yes, I'm speaking as the view of a digital agency and how we collaborate with our clients, but that still holds true as a collaboration as a freelancer to clients, as an engineer to my product manager, or as an engineer to my designer, as well as like as a product manager or as a designer to just my stakeholders. I think there's very much that we can generalize and take away from that. And it's not just about, oh, like, yeah, they're from an agency, they have to be open and very proactive about everything. I think that is really something that like everyone that works in a digital environment and like a product development environment, that they should follow and just like preach, because it just makes life so much more easy. So the first thing is I would like to talk a little bit about how we collaborated, what kind of tools we actually used, like really boil it down to like hands-on examples on like how we collaborated before we switched to Figma. And yeah, for that I want to dive into the tools first. I think we have seen it on Haerin's slides already. There were a lot of different tools. So we mainly designed in Sketch. We used Miro for whiteboarding and for workshops, especially digital workshops. We used InVision for all different kind of purposes. We used Zeppelin for all different kind of purposes, which I'm going to dive down in a second. And the last logo that's on this slide is Abstract, to manage different versions of Sketch files, as not just me was working on designs, but a lot of people are working on designs. And yeah, by then Sketch didn't have like Sketch Cloud or any kind of tools that supported that. So there was a big cloud of tools that one had to manage, and then that one had to be aware of in order to like really follow through with the whole design process and like the whole development process in itself. So we had to constantly see and check the different tools. And what that meant for our process was the following. So we usually, in every design process, you somehow start to understand and do some research, right? You want to get to know the problem and the user. Luckily, there are tools like Slack and G Drive that makes sharing knowledge and sharing information very, very easy, right? On top of that, there was Miro that became, or is becoming even now, more popular and popular. Also, this tool is like, okay, I need to get people into this tool. They need to get used to the tool. They need to understand it in order to actually use it. After that, there comes the user experience. So how does the product that we want to build, how do features look like? How do flows work? Like, where is the user coming from? Where can he go to? So for this, we had like always various tools, right? Like we had user flows mocked in Miro, in a Miro board. We had clickable prototypes in Sketch, but oh yeah, how do I share it now? And like, what is the easiest way to share it? Oh, maybe I will just build that prototype in InVision. So there were so many different options and so many different tools to fulfill one use case that you always jumped on different things. Like Sketch did one thing better, InVision did another thing better, but eventually you had to sync between those tools and you had to kind of keep both of them updated. So I remember a lot of calls with clients like, oh yeah, I'm looking at this InVision file, and I'm like, oh yeah, well, sorry, someone didn't press the sync button and you don't see the right screens. And that's just things that happen in real life. It's like developer handoff in InVision, but again, like someone didn't sync the file, or someone worked on something else and he synced something wrong, or like there was a duplication in your Sketch file names or in your Sketch artboard names, and you synced them to InVision and everything was overridden. And so there was a lot of pain and a lot of waiting for screens to sync within this process. Same goes for the prototyping, as I just said, like making clickable flows. Again, you had tools like InVision. Sketch could do some of it itself, but it couldn't easily share it as well. The comment function was not that good, then you would rely on InVision. And the same thing happened, right? Like comments were left in one place and you didn't look at them. You forgot about them in the next client meeting. The client was like, yeah, but I looked at the screens and I left some comments there. And you were like, yeah, well, I'm sorry. I didn't really see them. And again, like, yeah, oh, well, you looked at the wrong screens, or, oh, well, something broke while we synced the screens and you weren't able to follow the right prototype that we have actually built. And yeah, then for design, usually we use Sketch back then to create the visual design and the style guides for the clients. But again, like, how do you share it, right? Like, how do you, like, the clients couldn't just jump into the Sketch file and like look at things you have done. So you always had to either export PNGs, again, sync it to Figma, or do something with it in order to make it visible for the client. But there was no way of like collaborating while you're actually working on something, giving the client access to the file, and like just being open about the process, about how you go along. And again, interactions animation, how it then feels and works, like hover effects, scrolling effects, all of these kind of things that are part of a product development and the product development process. Same thing happened here. Like you had different tools that you could do or use for the same thing. You would pay for all of them as well. And then I think one of my favorite thing is the development handoff. So as you're a development agency and are heavily focused on technology products, like I always try to give my developers the best time possible. That's in my designs that I create, or in the designs that we create here at MVST, but also in like how they receive the designs. So we tried different tools. We tried Zeppelin, Avocode, InVision, like all of these tools had the back and forth. But none of them were like what we actually needed, because all of the people always had to use different tools, and you always had to sync into these tools. And you would forget about syncing, you're on a client meeting, the developers don't have the right screens, and so on and so on and so on. So what were the biggest pain points until we actually switched to Figma? So number one for me is we always had comments in 10 different places, right? Like InVision, Zeppelin, Sketch, somehow, Miro boards. So comments were all kind of over this place, or just sent in via email, and not like streamlined in one tool. So that was a big problem for us, not only with our clients and with our customers, but also internally with the development team. Whenever they had questions, they didn't quite know where to go. Then another problem, out of sync files and screens. So without abstract and proper version management, and before Sketch Cloud was introduced, but even then, we always had issues, and we always had a problem with files and actually out of sync files. We had to pay for a lot of tools. So as I mentioned, InVision, Sketch license, then we had Zeppelin and abstract as well. Then you pay for something like Framer or another prototyping tool. So you ramp up some costs quite quickly. And the thing that bugged me also the most was it was totally intransparent for our clients. So if we don't intentionally present them something, they have no idea what's going on. And that is something that I think Figma changed for us completely, in how open and transparent our process with our clients is. And that's actually one of the biggest things, like how we switched afterwards to Figma, right? Like what tools did we use? Well, that's what the whole talk about is. We just use Figma, right? Not 100% true. We also still rely on other communication tools like Slack and G Drive and things like that. But compared to the first picture, we took the chance and we actually got rid of a lot of tools in our day-to-day doing. So this reduced cost, and this also reduced friction for people joining our company, or people joining from the outside, helping us working on projects, as well as for clients, right? We just sent them one link and they have everything in there, and they don't need to switch tools, need to sign up to different tools. So this was quite the advancement. And what I want to do now is also talk a little bit about the processes that we are doing within Figma. And I think the first point is perfectly what Haerin said, and what her workshop template is about. So that's what we do with our clients as well inside Figma, especially during pandemic and the coronavirus, is we hold remote workshops, and instead of using Miro and then transferring everything to Figma, we just templated ourselves some workshop files. So a brand canvas, some feature mapping, some user journey mappings. We do all of that just in Figma, and it's always so easy. You just click on a share button, you copy the link, you send it to the client. No one needs to install anything in the best case, and it just runs and works for everyone. And that was a huge benefit for us as an agency, also during these times, that we could still hold our workshops and still be really collaborative with our clients, and not lose any customers or any value throughout this remote working time. Then as well, as we then already have all the ideas, we have all the possible solutions, we have all the scribbles, all the stuff that's coming from these workshops, we already have them in Figma. Like, we are still working within the same file the client has access to, and he can see his product evolving. And that's the beauty of it. Like, he can check, he's working, like doing something else, like on time, he can just like jump into the file. He can see like, oh, look, they have built something new. Now you can see some user flows, or you can see some actual mockups and how the user will go through the product. And this really excites them. And what it allowed us to do is be super open. We are not hiding anything from our clients. We're not hiding where we're getting inspiration from. We are not hiding like our iterations. They can look at our playground file. They can look in our archive. They can look at everything. And yeah, just find out like how we create their product in the end and how we develop their product in the design tool. And the same thing for the prototype. It's so easy to share. I don't know. I mean, Nikolas, I think Nikolas, you are working on the prototyping stuff a lot. I think as well as Figma. I've read that in your bio, but it has evolved dramatically, and you can almost create full-fledged products and with nice little and neat animations in Figma. And normally they're almost always enough to get the idea across to clients, to developers, or to just other designers and other product managers. And still, we are still within the same file. We haven't moved the file. All comments so far are within one file, and nothing is basically getting lost. Same for the design. So also all our designs and style guides, everything is done in Figma, being completely transparent with our clients, taking them along all the way. This allows us for full transparency, as well as the clients commenting and saying like, hey, guys, this direction is bullshit. Please, let's move somewhere else. And this allows us for such short feedback cycles, even with our developers. Like, usually they waited because they didn't have a Sketch license, or they didn't want to look into Sketch. They waited until the handoff to look at a project at sometimes, right? But now they're like, the first step, they're already into the project and into the file and like looking left and right. Hey, like, maybe we need to change that. And like, hey, why are the paddings fucked up here? And like, just being more involved, because we can be very collaborative with the Figma tool. And yeah, same for the interactions animations. I'm actually gonna skip that a little bit, but as I said, so you can, with the prototyping functions, you can create very detailed prototypes already. Some things are not yet there, but I know that Figma is working extensively to also fulfill this use case to the fullest. And last but not least, how I already said, the handoff is where the magic comes in for me. The developers have the power to actually export files themselves. The developer see all kind of margins, paddings, and all of that stuff themselves, but they're within my framework. I don't have to export anything. I don't have to like export complex flows in a PNG and send to them, because otherwise it might get lost in another tool where they can't properly follow that flow. And this is just like, hey guys, here's the link. This is the feature, look at it. Like, this is our feature flow, this is the design. You can comment on it, you can download icons, you can download PNGs and do everything within one tool. And that's like really, that's like an absolute benefit. And yeah, the biggest benefit summed up. So all of the comments in one place, it's just absolutely key, especially if you're working as a freelancer or if you're working in a client-facing business. You never want to lose comments from anyone, right? That's like the worst thing that can happen. And then our files are always in sync. Like, my coworkers can work on it, I can work on it, our engineers can work on it, and we always know for a fact that we are looking at the same file and at the same function, and we know it's the same version. Then what I've done 100 times now already is I have a client on the phone and I'm like, hey, why not just jump in a Figma file and let's like sketch out this idea together. And this has always absolutely amazed them, because they see how you, together with them, build out their idea. Like, even if it's just gray boxes and mock-up, it always helps so much in visualizing and actually bringing across the idea that the client might not be able to bring on paper. And this speed and this agility is just amazingly good for the clients, and just for working with anyone, actually. It's not just for the clients. And then the last one, fully transparent workflow. I think I've said it enough and enough times now, but being able to share your journey with anyone who would like to follow the journey from start to finish within one single file is an absolute killer feature and is an absolute killer function that everyone should make use of. And yeah, this was quite a praise on the Figma tool, but I think for us it really, really changed the game. It really, really helped us evolve and advance our capabilities and become actually also a solid company that can speed through development and that is very streamlined in that process. And I guess, yeah, that was it from my side and from my talk. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'm also happy to get questions from your side. I see a lot of thank yous in the stream. That's a pleasure. I hope you liked it. Cool. I think there are no more questions. What I would do right now is basically I would hand over, like, first of all, I would thank everyone for coming out. Like, we were way quicker than I expected, but I think that's a good thing. I hope you all could take away some knowledge from the 3 talks that we had. And yeah, based on the participant number, I think it was also a very successful first meetup. We will definitely host another round of Munich FIGMA Meetup in the next month, hopefully with some other good and interesting speakers. Yeah, if you enjoyed it, feel free to also share the group, join the group on FIGMA Meetup. Just a little bit of promotion never hurts. We will also record the video, so we will host that one later on somewhere for everyone to watch again, and also we'll float around Haerin's workshop link so that everyone is aware of that link and can download it. There's actually a question in the chat that I'm just going to pick up from Eureka. How do you usually hand off designs to engineers from Figma? So how we do it is basically that what we do is in the tickets that the engineers get, we put the exact Figma link to the exact frames that we're referring to, and that always leads them basically into the file and into the starting screen. So if it's a more complex flow with more designs, and we always try to keep them on a horizontal line so that the engineers know, okay, this is the way they pointed to, and this is the starting point, and then they go along the journey basically of the user flow, and that's how we hand it off to developers, because all the rest is done within Figma, right? Like as I said, they can download the icons, they can download the images, they can expect paddings and margins. So really simple, just sharing one artboard and making sure that your design added your file is not a mess and is ordered so that engineers can easily follow your flow. I hope that answered the question. So yeah, thanks a lot everyone for coming out. Feel free to share the meetup. We will be back with another round of talks quite soon. I would leave the channel open for another 15-20 minutes. If you have questions to Nikolas, to Haerin, or to everyone else in the group, if you want to promote yourself, if you're looking for a job, if you just want to exchange some ideas, the stage is yours. Feel free to chat. Thanks all for coming out and enjoy your evening.